Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit record and get started.
All right.
All right. Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This Koha Sandboxes webinar is brought to you by koha-US, the koha-US Education Committee, and Bywater Solutions. We're thankful that we could have Kyle and Nick join the koha-US committee members today to help bring this webinar to you. So first, I'd like to present Lizette. She is the koha-US president, to just have a few words for us.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for coming to our first education meeting. I'm Lizette Shear. I'm the current koha-US president for 2020, and we're really excited to get started with a new, hopefully the first in a set of panels, webinars from the Education Committee this year. And thanks so much to Nick and Kyle and everyone at Bywater who's helping out.
All right, wonderful. Thanks, Lizette. Okay, so I guess we'll kick things off. Kyle and Nick, if you just want to say your hellos, and then we can dive into things.
Hello. Did you want more than that, Jay-Z?
No, I'm just thankful I'm muting because I'm giggling over here.
Hi.
So Kyle and I are the developers here at Bywater. So clearly, you know, we're not used to interacting with people and actually talking to crowds like this. So we took Jay-Z very literally. But we are going to show you quickly how to use the sandboxes. So just a little bit of background on what the sandboxes are. Basically, when you come here, this is our link, sb1.sandboxes.bywatersolutions.com. This is our sandboxes server, and when you come here, you can create a new server. A sandbox is going to give you a fully installed development Koha environment. This will be, for all intents and purposes, a running Koha. There will be patrons in it, there will be items in it, and you can go here just to, if you want to test out some functionality, you can try that. If you want to test patches, which is kind of what they're designed for, you can do that. There is, for some background, wiki Koha sandboxes, there is a community sandboxes page where you can go, and I believe there is a link to our sandbox server here, as well as the other sandboxes that are available. Kyle will probably at the end tell you if you want to set up your own sandbox server, how to do that. So let me see if this has come up yet. Hey, we've got one that is ready. That will be good. So when you come here, the first thing you're going to want to do is set up your new sandbox. You can see usually who has created the sandboxes. This just lets you know who owns it, who's testing what. There's a description here. You can include that or not, but we'll go through the creation form. So if I click create here, what I get is this form. Your name. This is just where you enter that to identify to others that you're using this sandbox. So if you want to work with people, make sure your name's there so they can see it. Your email. Your name is also, I think, used in the sign-off portion, but we'll get there. Your email address. Thanks, Kyle. Enter a sandbox name. Now note this little text down here. It needs to be lowercase, all letters and numbers. Generally, this is going to be the name of what you're testing. So we can just use the bug. I've pulled up a few bugs here. They happen to be my bugs that need sign off. I just pulled a few sample ones for us to look at. So you give it a name, a sandbox number. This is where you can put the number of the patch you want to test if you want to start up your sandbox with that patch applied. You can leave this blank. If you leave it blank, you'll get current community master, which is sort of the head of the development version. It's all the most recent patches that have been pushed and will be included in the next Koha release.
Yeah, it's basically the bleeding edge.
Yeah. Get remote and branch. Occasionally there are patch sets that are real big. They have a lot of changes and they're too big to go into Bugzilla. And so the Koha developer will actually set up a remote Git repository with them there. If I have already scared you off, that's fine. You don't have to test those patches. Otherwise, what you'll do is you'll enter the repository URL and the name of the branch. I think that's probably a little more advanced than we're going to cover today.
Yeah, that is very, very rare, but the functionality is there.
Yeah, and you can always reach out to us in Slack or IRC if you want to do that and you have any questions if you hit one of those rare bugs. And that goes for anything that you see today. Just Kyle and I are both available. He is K Hall in IRC and I am Kid Clamp, and same in Slack. And if you're not part of our Slack channel, talk to Margaret or anyone on the support team. All right, description. This can be whatever you want. This is just free text to say, you know, testing this bug. And you could say like, for my library or whatever you wanted. Notes are the same thing, just kind of places where you can store information if you want to. What was the world's first open source ILS? It's Koha. If you do forget, we tell you it's in the top corner of the page. And just go ahead.
I was about to point out what you were about to point out too.
So the login information is here. If you need to log in initially, Koha and Koha are the username and the password. And the database user, which you shouldn't need for much, but if it does ask for it, it's just this. Koha, the sandbox name that you put up here, and then password. So I'll hit submit. You'll see now that we have on this page the list of things that are, list of sandboxes that have been created. If we refresh, the one that we've just created says provisioning. But fortunately, we set up this one ahead of time. Now, when I set up this one, I left the bug number blank. So there are no patches. This is actually master, but I did set it up to test bug 24423. So let's go look at that bug and we can see what it is. If you want to test a bug, there should be a test plan there. If there is not a test plan there, or you do not understand the test plan, feel free to mark the bug as failed QA and say, needs test plan, or test plan doesn't work, or anything like that. I am very much an advocate that you should never be afraid to use the failed QA status. It will get the developer's attention and they will need to do something to get it out of that failed QA status. You can just comment if it's actually a question, you know, if everything's working. You don't have to fail QA, but also don't be afraid to. So what we can do now is go to the test plan, find create a bib with at least one item. Okay, let's go here. We have our links to the staff and the OPAC. This bug is all about the staff side, so we can click here. That'll take us right there, and then Koha, just like we said before. Okay, I'm gonna search the catalog and find a bib with at least one item. We'll start with this one. From detail PL, use the checkboxes in the holdings table to select one or more items. So when we click on that record, that takes us to detail.pl. A lot of times that's the language that the developers will use when writing test patches. We will name the script that you're on without necessarily saying how to get there. We'll try to do better. Following the test plan, click modify from the detail PL, use the checkboxes in the holdings table to select one or more items. Did that. Click modify selected items, link above to go to batch modification. So if I click that, I'm taken here to batch modify. Change something and click save. Public note and click save. Okay. And now observe that the return to record link points to a URL without a biblio number. So if I look here, I don't know if you can all see it at the bottom of the screen, but it shows you the link destination down at the bottom, and you can see that biblio number is blank. If I click it, I end up nowhere. So now this next step is apply patch. So this is if you've created the sandbox without the bug already applied, this is where we can go and use one of the features of the sandboxes that we have these actions. we have a few options here. We have restart services. This is one that if it says to restart everything in the test plan, that's what you would click. Full Zebra reindex, build CSS. These are all things that should be indicated in the test plan if you need to do them. But we're just going to stick to the simple one of apply patches. And this is where we can just enter that bug number. It's right at the top here. So 24423. And hit submit. Now, what it's going to show us next is a little bit of command line interface. We can't interact with this. If you see this where it just ends with asking you a question, everything has worked as it is supposed to. Do not worry that you cannot answer that question. It has been answered. The script will automatically say yes to this. And then if there are any errors, I believe they will show up here. But in this case, the patch applied. If it didn't, that's where you would use the status on the bug called patch does not apply. And you would just say, I tried to apply it, it didn't work. But it did. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to go back over to the sandboxes. And just because it never hurts, I'm going to hit restart services. That just restarts memcached, Plaque, Apache, some other things on the server to make sure that we're using the up-to-date version of the code. So I can click back over here and start the test plan over. So if I click here again, back to detail.pl, check one item, modify selected items, and make the public node double test. And this time, if you'll note, it says biblio number equals 1. And if I click it, I should go back to the record. Hooray! So the next step is just to say, OK, I've applied the patch. I have tested the patch. Now what I want to do is sign off on the patches. When you're signing off, all you're doing is confirming that you have followed the test plan and it did what it said it would. You don't have to worry about checking that it doesn't break anything. That's QA's job, and they're very good at it. They're very particular. So when we click that little sign off button under actions, we'll get sent to this page. Your name will be copied over from what you put in before, same with your email. Please make sure both of these are filled out. This is so that you will get credit in the release notes for having helped us test a patch for Koha. It's exciting. The bug number and the number of patches. Now, the number of patches, you need to go and look and physically count this yourself. What you want to do is just count the number of attachments that have patch next to them. So in this case, it's 1. Very simple, 1. And again, what was the world's first open source ILS? Koha. Note this little thing down here. At this time, the sign-off tool does not set the status of the bug to signed off. So all this will do is attach your patches. If we hit submit and wait a few moments, you'll be able to see what I mean. Okay, so again, we get the command line stuff. Again, it ends with a question. Assume that it happened. If you click back over here to the bug and you reload the bug, what you'll actually see down here is that now it's signed off. So it says Bywater Sandboxes, because that's who technically signed it off, but then your name is put down here as the person who signed it off and tested. What you would do now, once you've done that, is you would go up to here, say signed off, and you could say tested with a sandbox, works great, or whatever you want to do. You don't even have to say anything. You can simply change the status and hit save. I'm not going to do that in this instance because I made a slight mistake in the fact that I put my own name and my own email there, and you're not allowed to sign off on your own bug. Unfortunately. If anyone who is listening, or all of you who are listening wants to, you can actually go to the sandbox, click the sign off button, and put in your name and your email to confirm that you were here, that you saw me test it, that you agree that it worked as expected, and hit submit, and that will just add your sign off to the patches on the bug. any questions so far? That's the real basic process of what you would do with these.
I think everyone is
stunned into silence.
Silence is golden.
Now, one thing I will note just here. So we spun up the sandbox. We tested bug 24423. I did spin up a second sandbox and I'll refresh to make sure that it is provisioned, to test 24236. It's possible that I could just decide to use this same sandbox and test another bug. I could just go here and hit apply patches and apply the patches for 24236 to this sandbox as well. There are instances where two patches will affect one another. So if you decide to test on a single sandbox and either you get problems during the application or problems during testing, you may want to retest with just the single patch applied, just to make sure that you haven't gotten any sort of cross-contamination from the two bugs. That's only likely if they're two bugs that are very related, that are kind of touching the same code. Question for you, Kyle. Are depends on links followed automatically for the sandboxes?
Ooh, that's a good question, and I don't have the answer right now. We should follow up on that. Okay. Write that down for me, because that would be very, very useful. I think we're using the community version and not Jonathan's. So I'm going to say I don't think so by default. Okay. Oh, that's a great enhancement. I like that.
And I can explain that a little more in a moment. What I wanted to see was now so you'll see now that the bug number applied to this, it's now updated it to 24236. Even though we have two sets of patches applied, we have 24423 and then 24236, it shows me the most recent one. So at least for testing, I'll always know which is the most recent one that I've applied.
So this would be a really good time to show them some of the logs. Now, some of these, the logs button over on the left, some of these are a little, don't worry if it looks scary and overwhelming. So what that provision log, this you mostly don't need to look at, but if something goes wrong when you're creating the sandbox, this is where we will see it. If something does go wrong, probably the easiest thing to do is to ask me or Nick.
Yeah.
The next one is the koha log. So you can see after we create the sandbox, we do a whole lot of setup to create like all those items and those patrons, the default data. Then we index the records. That's everything you see in here. So if you were to reindex, you would see things here. If there is the rare test plan that says, look at the error log and see that there is this error and this patch makes it go away, this is where you would look for that error. All you have to do is just hit refresh to keep updating it to see the latest stuff in the log. If you go back there, we also have the other logs too. So it might specifically reference the plaque log, the internet error log, or the OPAC log. We have those three things. Let's just put it at that.
And yeah, that would be if there's a bug out there that specifically mentions the logs. I'm gonna see if I can find one real quick.
Now, the really useful one for knowing what the heck patches you have applied to a sandbox is the koha git log. This is where you can open it up and see exactly what bugs have been applied. So you can see those two bugs that Nick applied. They're right at the top. That way, if you're unsure of what's been done to this sandbox, you can just open this up and you'll know exactly which bugs are on that sandbox.
And so just for an example, there's a bug here that I have put out there and asked for need sign off. Oh, I just keep mentioning my bugs. Sorry. that actually does mention checking the plaque logs to see if these errors are there, and then after the application of the patch, they shouldn't be there.
Perfect.
Yeah. Do we want to test another patch? Do we feel like we've covered most of the basics, or yeah, questions? Lizette, JZ?
I'll watch the chat and see if more questions come in, but maybe it would be a good time, Lizette, just if you could share a few words, like, you know, you're working in a library, and even at koha-US, the annual conference this year, Lizette got up in front of the crowd and showed everyone how to sign off on a patch. So Lizette, maybe some like encouraging words to share with people who might be a little nervous about getting started?
Yeah, so the first couple times I signed off on patches were, I was really afraid, especially when something went wrong, because I didn't want to mark anything as didn't apply or failed QA when it didn't do what it said it wanted to do. But everyone was always really, but I did it anyway, and then everyone was always really nice about it because I was afraid someone was going to be like, why do you keep failing my patches? Because I kept testing like the same people's patches because that was what was there in the queue because a lot of people were working. So it was like, I think Nick was there, but not Kyle, and Owen from Athens County Public Library. And I kept failing your guys' patches, and I was afraid that you were going to come over and be like, why are you failing all my patches? And instead they came over and they were like, hey, thanks for testing all those patches. And so like people just want their patches tested, and if it doesn't work, they'd rather know, you know, sooner rather than later. I know that that's when I've started writing patches. I'm always really happy when someone signs off on it like the same day, because then if I need to go back and fix something, I still remember what I was doing, especially if you're doing a bunch of different patches. Like I did 5 patches in a week a couple weeks ago that were all just little typos, and they all worked, but I was glad that they all got tested that week, because then I remembered, you know, if any of them had failed, where I went to do it. So that's helpful. Oh yeah, and the dashboard is really great that Kyle's bringing up, because it shows, you know, what needs sign off, so you can just, it's really easy to find what is needed. And you can sort it by like most recent, which he's doing now. The most recent ones are more likely to work, but the old ones, if you go and try signing them off, a lot of times they fail to apply because they're on code that doesn't match up anymore. And so then that's good to do too, because then you can get them out of the sign-off queue, and people know that they need to go back and fix them if they still want that to go through. And there's a few things that I've signed off on here that we were really excited for at our library that's in the system now. And so that's been helpful, because we've been able to push along some things that were kind of hovering and need sign off. Especially enhancements don't always get signed off right away if they're not sponsored. Because we're worried about fixing like so he's highlighting enhancement, or new statuses, normal.
All right. Just keep going, Lizette. You were mid-sentence. Only teasing. So I think what we were just highlighting was the different statuses here in Bugzilla. Lizette was talking about her experience getting started, which I will echo as well. I remember when I first started testing, I was always testing Kyle's patches and always failing QA on them. And I was pretty sure that Kyle did not like me. Then it turns out that Kyle wanted them to hire me. So that was great. So just a little bit about these statuses. The community would always like if you test the things that are marked as critical or majors. These are the bugs in the community. You can actually see like let me see if I can zoom that in a little bit. All the enhancements are highlighted in kind of a light gray, and all the bugs are in a darker black, and then the more severe bugs are in the darker red. So when you've gone to the dashboard and gone to the need sign-off list, if you're looking for things, these red ones are often the ones that would be dire for testing. These are also nice because the ones that are marked as bugs are typically the ones that will get backported. So if you're facing an issue, generally what will happen is Kyle and I will write a patch, and then we'll say, hey, we put it in community. If you can test it, that would be great. And this is the process that you can use to do that, to help us out and to help get these things back into your Koha. It's also true for enhancements. If you have paid for a development, the best thing you can do once we submit that code is to come here and test it yourself. Not only will that help move it ahead, but it will allow you to go through what we've done and verify that everything works as you expect it to. And so just to highlight one more place over here on the dashboard again, at the very top, we have this little green link that is a link. It's got the little caret there kind of to help you indicate that if you click it, this will show you all the major bugs and the things that need sign off as soon as possible.
Nick, can I say something?
Yeah.
This is Kelly. Two things that I didn't know about the sandboxes as they go away. So you only get a limited amount of time to be in the sandboxes, but you do have 2 renewals.
So it looks like 24 hours.
Yep.
Thank you. I was going to point that out next.
Right.
So that is, Kelly is right there. To keep, because any given server can only handle so many sandboxes, and a lot of people don't tend to clean up after themselves, you can delete your sandbox manually with that big red delete button after you're done with it. But sometimes people forget and it just sits there. A lot of people fear deleting someone else's sandbox because maybe they're still using it. So basically, we have an expiration time on it, 24 hours from then. If you want to keep it around, you can choose to renew it. I chose to do 2 renewals. If you would like me to bump that up, I would be happy to do so. And that lets you keep that sandbox running. Another thing I want to say is if you are a heavy sandbox user and you would like your own server like this, it is very, I'm going to say fairly easy to set one up. Maybe your library has some servers and they have some space to give you to have your own server. Yeah, it's that top one. Basically, to set this up, all you do is it needs to be a Debian server with Ansible installed, and then you run that setup sandbox server, and it does everything else. There's a few things that you can set, and then you'll be off and running. And that one, you can choose all the things. You can choose whether to have an expiration time or not, how many renewals. That way, maybe you can just have those sandboxes around indefinitely on your own personal playground. I know that PTFS Europe is also using this for their own sandboxes now. And we actually saw that link on the Sandboxes wiki page on the Koha wiki. So if that is something you're interested in doing and you need any guidance, we are here to help.
And then there's just one more thing that I thought of when Liz was talking, is if you do have a comment or you really can't understand the test plan or you have questions for the developer, but you want to be able to sign off on it, you should add a CC to the bug so you know when the developer comments back.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you add yourself, then you'll know, because I feel as though a lot of the developers who have patch or who have things that want to be signed off on are waiting for feedback so it can move on. So I've found they're very quick to respond, and then you can pop back into the sandboxes and either sign off or make more comments.
Yeah. If you are signed into Bugzilla, whenever you're looking at a bug, all you actually need to do is there's a CC list. If you just check that and hit Save Changes, it will add you right to that bug. If you do not have a Bugzilla account yet, signing up is very easy. Much like anything else, you just click New Account, fill in your email address, and you'll get an email back confirming, I think, to sign up. easy enough to do.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome. Right before we got like shaken up a little bit, somebody did ask to see another patch signed off, Nick.
Okay.
Yeah, Michelle asked if we could walk through another one. Thanks, Kelly.
Okay, that one is past you. I thought I had brought up one that was not one of ours, but so let's see. If we go back to the sandboxes, I had just applied 24236 to this next sandbox. So we can test this one out. If anyone has another one that they want to see, go ahead and you can put a link in the chat or let us know and we can test it, but I'll just carry on with this one. So this one, again, we should look at the test plan. It should tell us what to do, or it should tell us what the problem is. This is when you do a search that has multiple page results and cataloging. If you do that search in quotations, it will not allow you to advance the page. So we can, unfortunately, we've already applied the patch, which means that we can't do these first 4 steps. We can just kind of trust that it's there. That's why generally I like to bring the sandboxes up empty first and apply the patch after the fact. But if we go here, well, yeah. So we click on staff again for either one of these. Koha. We go to cataloging, and we just do a search for, I'm gonna do a search for A because I know that cat won't get us enough results in the sandbox. So we see we've got the first page of results here, and if I click next, hopefully, yay, it works. That's a little anticlimactic because you didn't see it fail.
What if you popped into one of those other sandboxes?
Well, these both have that patch applied. I can go to this one.
Yeah, try FF.
So if we do the same thing in cataloging, search for A.
Yeah,
there's nothing there. So that illustrates the problem pretty clearly. If we try a search for A, we should see that that one does work. Yeah, it lets us page through. So back to, we did that one already. Repeat the search, you can paginate. Enable the use query parser syspref. Don't worry about installing, and confirm that we can still search with quotes. And this is a good point to point out that, you know, I did in that test plan, I just assumed that you knew how to enable system preferences and where to find them and all of that. If you don't, feel free to ask. The first person to test this bug was Micah, who I don't know if she's in our group today, but when she tested, she could not recreate the problem. And that may be because I didn't specify what I meant by cataloging search. That could have meant a Z3950 search. It could have meant other things. So I actually provided links. I was very happy to follow up. When she did this, she marked the patch as failed QA, and I came back in and commented and marked it again as need sign off. And I was very happy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's finish this testing. I think there is a question in the chat as well, but I'm just going to try this, confirm that it works, and then I will look at that. Yay, I can still paginate. Are there statistics of the numbers/last numbers of current record types for the database as provided during a fresh sandbox provision? I don't know that we have any of that listed anywhere. I can tell you off the top of my head, there are 436 records installed when you install the sample database, and there are 1,709 authority records installed. That data is actually all out in the Koha GitHub, in the, what repo is that, Kyle?
That is Jonathan's.
Is for dev.
Thank you.
Yes. So this is the Koha miscellaneous tools for developers that actually lists all of the stuff. This is what we use to run that log that installs the super library and installs all the files in this do what you can do PL. The data is here in the data SQL Mark 21. There is only Mark 21 data right now. That is what is done standard. And here there's the Biblio SQL, the item SQL, and I think that these are, we don't have like Mark records, we just force install the data directly. So if you want to come here and download that and look at it, you are free to. You can also run reports on the server itself. You could go to the reports module and do that to sign it off or to check out what data is there. I believe it's 436 though. Now, we have gone through, we tested this, we saw that it worked. Is there anybody who wants to raise their hand and say, you can sign off this bug in my name? Because I can't do it because I wrote the patch. Ooh, somebody raised their hand. George! All right, thank you, George. So I'm going to go, it doesn't matter which sandbox because I've applied it to both. If I go to sign off patches, this time I'm going to do George Williams and not a clue what George's email address is off the top of my head. Thank you. I could have maybe guessed that one. I'll leave the bug number of patches. I think it's just 1 again. Yep. 1 and koha. And then I'll submit this and get rid of that space.
After this sign off, maybe just find a bug with multiple patches so they can see it.
Yeah. Lizette did put a bug in there, but I have not pulled up that one yet. All right, so now, this time, oh, it's still, your patch doesn't listen to us, Kyle.
All right, file a bug.
So it looks like the name that you set up the server with is what it's going to use for the sign off, even if you try to correct it on that sign off page. So someone will still have to retest this one and attach the patch. This is just really community rules so that a developer can't just sign off their own patches and get them through community. In fact, Kyle's not allowed to sign off on my patches, and I can't sign off on Kyle's patches. And we can't QA each other's patches because apparently we're too invested. Although I'm really happy to fill QA on Kyle's patches. Like, I enjoy it a lot. Oh, sorry, Kyle's still here. Oops.
Likewise. Feeling is likewise.
George said he'll go ahead and sign off through the sandboxes for that one.
Thank you, George.
And
all right.
If you're really pressed, you can just put a comment to say, I would like to sign off on this patch, and someone like me or Nick or anyone who knows how to do Git stuff will usually come around and edit the patch and add your sign off and re-upload it. But it's much easier just to, go through the sandbox if you can.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're definitely, like, any problems that you hit, any questions that you have, we are happy to help. The sandboxes do support Elasticsearch right now. However, they don't re-index the records into Elastic, and you don't have that tool. But if you want to test something on a sandbox, just catch us in IRC or Slack and poke us, and we can actually go into the back end and re-index the Elastic records for you. And I'm very happy to do that to get Elastic patches signed off on. So Lizette put another patch in there, or another bug in there that has multiple patches. I was just clearing out some windows so that I wouldn't get so lost. But if we go back to 21674, this one has 2 patches. We can apply those and see. Now this one also has database changes, which I haven't done on here in a while, but we'll give it a shot. 21674. Do you know if the database updates are automatically run, Kyle, or will I need to do that?
If you applied it after the fact, you need to run them by... Actually, no. I can see it right there.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I wrote this code, so it might as well have been written by someone else.
So applying the patches will automatically run any database updates that are on the bug, so you won't need to worry about that part, which is good. Having done that, though, I am going to still restart all the services. Well, actually, let's reload the page because that'll show me that I applied it, and then I can restart the services. Okay, and so now we just need to follow the test plan, and I'm going to do this. Okay, so go to Home Administration Library Groups. Add a group, title test group, hit save, add a library, let's add Pleasant Valley, and then he just says refresh the page. Oh, and it keeps adding. Without this patch, the same library appears several times. With this patch, you will see a friendly error message. I applied the patch, I did the upgrade, but I don't see. I probably need to rebuild the debug, don't I?
It's not going to hurt. It doesn't specifically specify that. What do the? But if there's nothing in the patches, yeah, you are.
As a unique key, that would affect the schema.
Yes.
Correct. So when you do that, there is no feedback. I imagine it will show in one of the logs, Kyle?
That's a good question. Martin, I can say that I didn't do this feature, and I'm pretty sure Martin added that.
Okay, so I don't see anything.
Check the Docker log. No, we don't see it there either.
So presumably it happened, but if you need to restart the schema, usually it'll say something in the bug patch, or there will be a patch included that will do that. But after we refresh the schema, I think we need to restart services again. And I'm going to try removing all of these just to get back to. Let's see, add library, Fairfield. This does not seem to be working on the sandbox. And this is where you could easily come in and say, QA, like tested on a sandbox, did not work. I can almost guarantee you that Jonathan will come back and tell me to retest it on my dev server, but that's because we're developers and we have good relationships. So if we did want to sign this one off, just pretending that it did work, it really would be, there's no difference when we put in 2 here, we would just put in 2. It would do the exact same thing, except it would reattach both patches with my name appended for sign off on them. But don't be discouraged if you try to test something and it fails. That is much better. I always say failed QA is better than no QA at all. Otherwise, we'll be waiting for them. George asks, are there any bugs that you can't really test in the sandboxes? Go ahead.
Oh, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, it's fine.
I would say any that tell you to run scripts at the command line. I do remember long ago adding a feature we have not enabled that would allow you to SSH into your sandbox machine, but we're trying to fully explore the security implications of that before we turn it on. And once that is enabled, then there is very little that you would not be able to do with a sandbox.
So George mentions bug 24339, for example. Now this one you technically could do because you do have the option in the sandbox to clear the database, which will run you through the web installer, and then you'll have a fresh empty database. with all the default values, and you can check them and do them there. So it's command line stuff that you won't be able to do.
Yeah. If, for example, there was a patch that literally said, like, make a SIP to send a SIP message to Koha's SIP2 server, we can't do that right now because that requires like getting into the command line and turning on the SIP server.
Actually, doesn't SIP run out of the box on these servers now?
It might. The sandboxes build on other projects that as you've seen, primarily the Koha testing Docker by Tomas Arazi.
Yeah.
So anytime he makes improvements to that, they sort of filter into this, just as a matter of course.
Yeah, so it would be anything that says command line you're not going to be able to do. But I believe that SIP actually might run out of the box, and if it doesn't, it will very soon, and then you would actually be able to, well, you'd have to have the SIP command line installer installed locally, but you would technically be able to hit the SIP server.
Mm-hmm. Or the next one of these can be all about Telnet and communicating with SIP over Telnet.
So if you let me and Kyle talk long enough, we're going to start to have really big and really bad ideas.
That's what we do best.
So I'm going to ask if there are any more questions because we're nearing an hour here. So I just want to make sure that we get everything answered for everybody.
Go ahead, George.
Yes.
We're all waiting for George to type. We're watching the chat for the listeners out there so you know what's happening. Along the header at the top, somewhere next to Koha Sandboxes Home Create, could you add a link to a set of instructions on how to use the sandboxes? That's a really great idea, to have a link to the Sandboxes wiki here. And possibly, we've done several demos of the sandboxes and things like that, so that might be some useful things. And even just some other useful links to this video.
Yes, I was thinking that same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think we have a Monday Minute on one of them too about just how to fill out the form, so we can link to those things.
Yeah. So, yeah, please, once you're here, you can see this Issues tab, which I was about to bring up. Feel free to file issues where you run into bugs, like our sign-off bug, or enhancements that would be nice and useful.
You will need a GitHub account if you're going to do this. Signing up for that is simple, basically a web form again. But if you have one, then you can come in and comment on any of the sandbox issues here, or anything else that is in our GitHub. There are plugins here and other things like that. But again, I'm just talking because they've given me a microphone.
Yes. We are quite prolific. Right now we have 103 separate repositories on GitHub.
Wow. And George has one more question coming, which should I agree in signing off again? That is a good question. I believe it was 24236. Yes. All right. Anybody else have any other questions? Final thoughts, Jay-Z or Lizette?
Yeah, thank you. You guys did great, and we're terribly sorry for the Zoom going down in the middle of the session there. I will splice them together and send that link out on the koha-US website. So if anyone wants to go back and watch it, you can re-watch it. It'll be available on demand within the next day or so. And I'd like to just greatly thank koha-US for starting these education hours. Lizette, thank you so much. And also a big thank you to Kyle and Nick. We so appreciate you being able to help the community walk through testing bugs and really getting familiar with the sandboxes. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you everyone, and also thanks to Bywater for hosting this webinar for us, and for Nick and Kyle for doing the webinar.
You're very welcome. Thank you guys for letting us play around.
All right, wonderful. Well, have a great day, everybody.